Oh, we are back talking Dynasty. Garret Price, Jared Wackerly. We are here ready for today's show. We are back in football season, which this is our first show since football's been back. So, Jared, in 37 words, give me your feelings on the beginning of the football season.
Crazy, as always. All like unexpected production and non-production, like Marvin Harrison. I took him in a couple redraft leagues in like the second round, and that is not what we wanted.
No.
1 and 2 in my campus to Canton leagues, Talkin Dynasty league. I think I lost. No, I won the NFL side for the C2C and the Devy. I won by like 1 point in the Devy league. Nice. Shout out to Red Falcon. Good game. But how do your teams do?
Overall, it was a pretty good week for me. Even the C2C that we just did, I basically punted my college side and still won week 1, which was pretty freaking cool. So I am, but I lost this week, I believe, actually. Let me double check. I don't remember now. I'm drawing a blank because I've been so focused on the NFL. But yeah, overall, I feel pretty good about how things have been going. There's a lot of interesting college names to talk about, and that's really what we're going to be getting into today because it's a fun class. Lots of names that we thought, why not? Because we're not going to do this anytime soon on the Dynasty Nerds podcast. Why not go ahead and do a mock draft with the 2025 class? But we're doing it a little bit different than you might expect. So, Jared, explain to the folks how we're planning on doing it this week.
Yeah, so we're actually going to do a 1 quarterback mock draft, but we're going to discuss the quarterbacks because our philosophy at Dynasty Nerds is all predicated on what quarterbacks go in the first round, and that helps dictate how our rookie drafts are going to go, obviously, in Superflex leagues. Majority of leagues are now Superflex leagues, so quarterbacks going in the first round is what matters, and that establishes the depth, along with tight ends a little bit with the premium leagues, but we think if we just go over the 1 quarterback, if we go through a 1 quarterback mock draft, get rid of the quarterbacks, then we can kind of talk about the running backs and receivers a little more and focus in on those guys. But we're still going to touch on the quarterbacks, give you guys an update on how those prospects are looking now 2 weeks through the college football season and who we're projecting to possibly be those first-round picks.
Absolutely. So I don't think we need to waste a ton of time. Let's get right into the quarterback talk. Like, I would say right now for me, and you can say differently. Obviously, you're your own person, Jared. But
I am.
Right now, if you were to ask me to place a $100 bet on who the QB1 is, I would cry because I have no idea who the number 1, like, I think you could honestly make a good guess as to up to 4, possibly even 5 guys.
Yeah. If you had to make that bet, though, who would it be right now?
Honestly, it might be Quinn Ewers.
All the talent in the world. Not a bad pick.
He does. Like, he's got the pedigree, and that Michigan game did a lot for me personally. To see him go toe-to-toe with a big-time team, make all the throws, like, he looks much more accurate this year. I don't know if it's, like, I haven't done a deep dive into it, and you would know this better than I would even, but I don't know if he's cleaned up his footwork or, like, I don't know what it is that's causing him to be less erratic, but he's making good decisions, he's making good throws, and he's leading his team to victories. So, like, it right now, I think it's Ewers for me.
He has the highest odds to win the Heisman Trophy right now, coming off the huge win versus Michigan where he looked great. And Steve Sarkisian, his head football coach at Texas right now, I mean, he's put in Matt Leinart, Carson Palmer. I mean, it goes back to how many quarterbacks that he's put in the NFL. So he's learning from the right guy. And I think we're finally starting to see him maturing, understanding the offense, understanding how to read a defense, because the talent and the arm talent and everything has always been there. It's always been the little things that he needs to clean up. And I think one of the biggest things coming off last year was his deep ball accuracy and how he handled pressure and that footwork, like you mentioned. And it seems like, to me at least, like he's cleaned up a lot of that. And Texas is doing really well because of it. It all falls on his shoulders. And, I mean, if he leads Texas to a national championship and wins the Heisman this year, you can lock him in as being the first overall pick. So I'm with you. I think Quinn Ewers is a lock for an early first-round pick, I think, if he continues this trajectory this year.
Absolutely. I know Carson, Beck, and Shedeur Sanders were kind of the favorites just 3 weeks ago. Beck's looked fine. I don't think he's done anything to like really hurt himself, but he also hasn't done anything that's like, oh, okay, now we're seeing this, or like he looks the same, which is fine, but that doesn't necessarily help you. Shedeur, it's such a weird situation because you see him at times make throws and make plays that you're like, oh my gosh, like that's beautiful, like pressure in his face, dropping 30-yard like dots, like just dots. But you also have to like wonder, why is Colorado losing to these scrub schools? And I get it, their defense is atrocious, like so bad. But still, if you're a number 1 overall candidate pick, you would think you would be with a legitimate 5-star wide receiver. You would think you would be leading your team at least over these like meh schools.
Yeah. Well, you just dissed Nebraska pretty hard, man. I mean, Nebraska, dude. Nah, they've been pretty.
I mean, Dylan Raiola, I mean, he's been great and whatnot, but like
they're back.
Yeah, they might be. I hope they are.
Anyway, I mean, let's not forget it is Colorado, and what they came into there was pretty atrocious. Probably one of the worst programs in all of college football. I watched back the Nebraska game the other day, and dude, he had no protection, nothing, and he was getting hit all the time. And my issue with it is he let it be known in the media and called his O-line out. That's like a huge no, and a red flag in terms of being a leader within that locker room. Now, I'm not in that locker room, but I've been a quarterback, and you don't do that. So I'm really interested to see how this season kind of plays out. I know that everyone knows that, like, drafting this guy, there's going to be a circus that comes with it. Kind of like Johnny Manziel, kind of like Tim Tebow, each case for its own reasons. I'm not saying that he's like those guys. He's his own person. But from like a talent standpoint and a quarterback standpoint, he's really good. Like, I think he's got all the arm talent that he needs. He goes through his progression. He layers throws over the middle of the field when he needs to. He's able to pick up first downs on the ground. He's not the fastest guy, but he's fast enough. So all other things aside, I think he could turn out to be a pretty damn good pro.
If his name was Bob Wilson and he played for Mississippi State, like, we'd probably feel pretty good about him just as like a player without all of the otherness, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, his dad's not Deion Sanders, and I don't even hate on Shedeur or Deion for what they're doing. Like, that's just who they are. And there are things that Shedeur brings on himself, what he says in the media and everything. So that's all on him. But I think it's going to drop his draft stock a little bit because there's only going to be certain teams, owners, coaches that are going to be okay with these things. It's not, it's a non-traditional style of leadership or whatever you want to call it. But so I think, like, because of that, because you're filtering out some franchises that are going to be okay with this kind of stuff, I think he's going to drop a little bit, but I think he's going to be a first-round pick for sure. So, and then I do want to touch on Carson Beck a little bit too. Like, Georgia really hasn't had a chance to play anybody yet this year, so we'll kind of see on him once we get into the SEC schedule. But everything that you want from quarterbacks there, aside from picking up yards on the ground, he is good enough of an athlete to get first downs, just like Shedeur. but
Yep.
not gonna get a ton of rushing yards for you for fantasy football purposes. But so far we talked about Quinn, Shedeur, and Carson, and I think these are three guys that can be first round picks.
So we said 4 to 5. The guy that I'm putting in as the 4, and you could argue, we talked about like maybe some limited athleticism with some of the other guys that we've talked about. This guy does not have any issues with that at all. Cameron Ward from Miami, he's looked, you could argue, just as good, if not better, than any of these other quarterbacks to this point. And I know that he didn't have the biggest name compared to these guys coming into the season, but early on, now he has a lot to still prove, but early on, he's done everything you would ask him to do.
I just put a bet in for him to win the Heisman, actually. I mean, if you look at Miami's schedule, there's really not much there that scares you. Their biggest game was Florida early on in the year, and they beat them handedly, and he showed out really good. But, man, it's funny because when I watch Quinn Ewers and I watch Cam Ward, their like style of throwing and just their calmness in the pocket, and even Dylan Raiola, because I was watching him versus Colorado too. Like they just all, I don't know if it's like the new style of the way quarterbacks are being coached, but they all kind of have the same style of throwing. Like Cam Ward has all the arm talent you'd want as well. He's also another guy that's not like super athletic, but he can pick up the first downs. I would say he's a little more athletic than Carson Beck and
he's
Shedeur.
Definitely the most athletic in this class of these guys, I would say.
But right now he's got a 75% completion rate, almost 700 yards passing, 6 pass touchdowns, 1 interception. So
what I like
could
about
end up being
him,
the first overall pick.
I agree. And what I've liked so far is, despite him being a very good athlete, he's a pass first quarterback. Like it's not like your, Jaden Daniels and Justin Fields and Lamar's and guys like that. Like, and granted, I don't think he's quite to that level of athlete. He's a very good athlete, but he's not quite to that level. But he is consistently looking to throw the ball first. He's only looking to run the ball 5 times a game. Like he's not running it 10 plus times a game, but when he runs it, he's got wheels, he's got a motor. So I have been very, very impressed with him as well. It's one of those teams that I hope makes the playoffs, because I would like to see him up against some Big Ten, some SEC type defenses, because I think that would really go a long way too against some top tier competition to say, is he just beating up on the ACC, which is not as good right now, or is he really up there with those top tier guys? Because from what I've seen, and he's a transfer too, he didn't start his career out at Miami. He was at Washington State, where they sling the ball around and whatnot. But yeah, he's another really interesting name. Last one, I don't know how I feel about this guy, but there's a lot of tools there with Drew Allar. How do you feel about him?
I thought you were going to say Jalen Milroe from Alabama.
Oh, I mean, Milroe has plenty of tools as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple guys still. Like there's Jalen Milroe, there's Garrett Nussmeier from LSU, who's looked pretty good.
Not a lot of playing time before this year, but he's been crushing.
Right. Drew Allar, talk about size and stature for like your prototypical quarterback. He's got it, 6'5", 243 pounds, from Ohio, our boy from Ohio. I would say his career at Penn State's been pretty up and down. So 2024 is going to be really big for him. They almost just lost to Bowling Green. So I don't know. I'm not huge on Drew Allar, but from a tool standpoint, he's got everything. He's got everything you need. He's got elite arm strength. He's got a quick release. Seems to understand like where he needs to go with the football. I think the biggest thing with him is just his accuracy, and accuracy is huge for quarterbacks. It's one of my biggest things I always look at, because if you're inaccurate, when you go to the NFL where the throwing windows are so much smaller and you got to be able to anticipate those windows, you got to throw them before they're even there. Like you got to be accurate. And if you're inconsistent with that, you're not going to have a long career. So, yeah, Drew Allar, let's pay attention to him. We'll come back to him probably in a few weeks when we do another 2025 class preview show.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Any other quarterbacks you want to touch on? Do you want to touch on Milroe or?
I mean, just so everyone knows, Jalen Milroe, quarterback from Alabama. You've probably heard of him. Super good athlete. One of the best athletes in this entire class, no matter what position you're looking at. I've heard that he's the fastest player on Alabama's team, if that tells you anything. So biggest thing with him, again, accuracy in a consistent fashion. Can he throw the ball? We know he can get you yards on the ground, but Alabama's looked pretty good this year. He's also looked pretty good this year against Western Kentucky. He was 7 of 9 for 200 yards and 3 touchdowns, 10 attempts on the ground, 79 yards and 2 touchdowns. So this dude's a playmaking machine, and with the way the NFL offenses are changing and willing to adapt to these athletes at the quarterback position, there could be a guy out there, a team out there in the first round that's willing to take a shot on developing Milroe. So we could be looking at even another first-round quarterback here with 5.
Yeah, it would be wild. It's weird because we're talking about similar number of first-round quarterbacks as we were last year, but yet my confidence level in them is so much lower than at least the top end of this year's class. Yeah.
Yeah, as of right now. Yep. And that's how we felt going into this season. We're like, who's going to be the guys? We know some of them are going to emerge, and they're starting to. So yeah, it's going to be fun to follow as we go along here. And Garrett, like we're planning on doing a 2025 class preview shows, every 3 to 4 weeks or something.
Something like that. Yep. We'll throw in some other stuff with Talkin Dynasty, but we want to make sure that you stay up on what's going on in this class. And, we don't do a ton of that on the main show intentionally, but this will be an opportunity to kind of keep tabs on the 2025 players.
Yep.
All right. We want to get into this mock draft here, Jared?
Let's go.
All right. So Jared was kind enough to allow me to go first. And I don't know if that was intentional because he didn't really care who I picked at 1. So he could take the other one at 2. I ended up going with Luther. Honestly, I could have gone either way. It's really a coin flip at this point between Luther Burden and Tet McMillan. I ended up going with Luther Burden. And look, Tet McMillan, freak in so many senses of the word. Just freaky stuff that he's able to do. But Luther Burden, he was the top receiver in his class coming out. He's been playing in the SEC. We've seen it for 2 years already where it's just monster numbers. He fits really well into today's NFL. We gave him, and I hate it because I hear this a lot, but he really is a decent Debo type of comp where he's an explosive player, but it's more about run after the catch, being, he's 205, 210 pounds as a 5'11" guy. So he's built more like a running back than he is like a wide receiver. So he's just such a good fit for so many teams could use a guy like that. And in an age where not that size is not important anymore, it is, but that traditional X guy isn't as dominant as he once was typically. So I think because of the era, that was like the tiebreaker for me, but both guys are just so freaky good that I would have been fine getting either one here, but I took Luther Burden.
Yeah, I like that pick. I mean, you can go either way, like you said. He's had a little slower start to the season. He had 4 catches against Murray State, 49 yards and a touchdown. And then last week against Buffalo, he had 3 catches for only 15 yards. And then I know he's questionable for this week. I think he's sick, but it sounds like he's probably going to play. But yeah, super explosive, really good athlete, good at the catch point as well, can do everything you ask of him to do. I want to see a little more from Burden as far as being just a true receiver, running the route tree and digging into his film.
Even with that, it's good, but he has another touchdown and 21 yards on the ground, 2 attempts. So he really is that more like Debo type of guy where he's just going to do, he's a running back that plays wide receiver.
I'm sure if you search Debo and Luther Burden together on Twitter, you'll see so many people comping them because that is the perfect comp to give people the idea of like how this guy plays football.
Yep, absolutely.
So I am up here with the second pick, and you spoiled it earlier. I'm taking Tet McMillan, wide receiver from Arizona, 6'5", 210 pounds, with quickness of a cheetah. Is that a good metaphor for quickness? Maybe a rabbit. I don't know.
Are they? Yeah, maybe quickness of a rabbit, because I think cheetah's long speed, rabbit's that quick. Like,
hey, whatever. Terrific at the catch point, body control. I mean, give him a 10 in our nerd score.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
This guy is gonna have probably one of the highest body control grades that I will have given in the last 4 or 5 years. And if you haven't listened to this show before, we broke down what correlates to NFL production when we do our nerd scores, when we had David Zach on as a guest on the show. And believe it or not, body control had the largest correlating score and factor to NFL fantasy football success at the wide receiver position. And this guy just has that. I think he's going to be the number 1 receiver in the NFL draft next year. I mean, so far in the 2024 season, in the opener against New Mexico, he put up 304 receiving yards on 10 catches for 4 touchdowns. He averaged 30 yards per catch.
That's stupid. That's stupid.
Yeah. The last game, though, he had 2 catches for 11 yards. So
did somebody get on their QB and was like, bro, all you can do is throw to Tet McMillan. You're not even good. And he was like, I'll show you.
We're just going to triple
throw
this
to everybody else.
I did not get a chance to like watch that game to see what happened. But I don't think they played anybody that was really good. Who did they play? Northern Arizona. So I'm sure they weren't too concerned with if they were going to win that game or not. But in 2023, I mean, he put up over 1,400 yards, 10 touchdowns, averaged 15 yards a catch. This guy is it. He's the guy. He's a number 1. You're going to be able to throw the ball to him in the red zone. There's just not much not to like with this guy, and I'm really excited to see like what his nerd score ends up being for us and his nerd score plus. Have we talked about nerd score plus at all on the Talkin Dynasty show yet, Garrett?
I don't think we've done it on the Talkin. I did on one of the live shows. We kind of broke it down, but no, we have not talked about Nerd Score Plus, other than just like saying, hey, there's Nerd Score Plus on the main podcast.
Why don't you tell everybody about it like real quick, since we just brought it up?
So it's kind of another layer to the Nerd Score. It's one of the things that we've always talked about. The Nerd Score is not meant to be a ranking system. It is simply just, how do they look on tape before the draft, before like all of these other things? How do they just look on tape? Well, we figured maybe we could see if we could come up with some sort of ranking system, but it really still leans heavily on their tape score, Nerd Score. So we came up with Nerd Score Plus, and basically what it is it takes into score, a large chunk of it is still Nerd Score, but then it also factors in draft capital, landing spot, college production, and college competition level. So it takes into those 4 things into account with the tape score, and then spits out a new number. And what we saw by going back in time, now granted, yes, you could say there's a little bit of revisionist history with some of it, but honestly, the only one that we can even really put our bias into of those 4 new things is landing spot, because all of the other ones are based on a scoring system of, okay, their college production was blah, 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 blah. They get this for it. Their competition level, we literally go back and look at who they played, and there's a ranking system on ESPN for the strength of schedule. We use that. You look at their draft capital, we can't affect that, so all of those things, those are all objective numbers. And then we do our best to give a landing spot score. So that's partly where they went to, but it's also their opportunity in that system, how well that system fits with them, all of those types of things. Try our best to give a good solid score for that. So this is something that you could hypothetically just draft right off of, because it's more of a true model to be able to tell you how good a player is, not just on tape, but with all of the other factors combined as well.
I love it. Let's keep it going in the draft. Garrett, you're up with 103, dude.
All right. If I were to tell you that a running back had 9 rushing touchdowns in a season, that's a pretty solid number, right? I mean,
yeah.
For instance, the number one running back taken last year, Jonathan Brooks, had 10 rushing touchdowns on the season in 11 games. Like, that's a good number. It's a very solid number. Well, the guy I'm taking here at 3 has 9 through 2 games. That's right. In just 2 games, this guy has 9. It's Ashton Jeanty. Look, you've probably heard about him now at this point. An underrated guy that was starting to get some buzz in the steam in the offseason because he's a Boise State guy. It's not one of the biggest programs. But the first game, he comes out, throws up 6 tutties. 6 of them, which is a bonkers number. Like, absolute bonkers. But, like, they had 267 yards on top of it, by the way. But I don't want to say I wrote that off, but I was like, they're playing Georgia Southern. Like, okay, like, yes, that's still an absurd number, but it's Georgia Southern. Yeah. When he came out last week and went up against Oregon, a top 10 ranked team, put up 192 yards and 3 touchdowns, that, like, as Rich Dotson says, that took me 6 to midnight. Like, that's unreal. That's unreal. Like, anything. And, like, I was listening to some stuff about this kid. Like, they talk about him being so good for their program because not only is he far and away the best player, but he's far and away the hardest worker on the team. They said, like, they can't get him out of the weight room. Like, he is constantly putting in the work, putting in the time, doing the things that need to be done to be a great player. And you see that translate on the field. They just came within 3 points of upsetting a top 10 team. And the rest of the team is fine, but it's because of him. Like, he is the reason they are that good. The contact balance, absurd, absolutely absurd. And he's not a huge guy. He's going to be probably 5'9" He's listed around 215. So that weighing above 210 at under 5'10" is great. I mean, that's great BMI. So there is not a lot to nitpick about this player at this point.
Yeah, he's going to get it done for you on the ground and as a receiver. He's a great pass catching back as well. We've seen smaller stature guys come in and be good in the NFL because they're short doesn't mean they're small. Like, at the running back position, It doesn't really matter.
Exactly.
So as long as he's got that weight on him and he carries it well, like he does, like he's 215 pounds. Like, I see that. This kid, like, I dug into him as well. Garrett, it says that he squats over 600 pounds. So he definitely is a weight room freak. He comes from a military family. I guess he had to move around a lot. He actually played 7th through freshman year in Italy. He played football before moving back to Texas. So I, just growing up in a military family and hearing what you hear, it just sounds like this guy is just all about work, and it shows up on the field. Would-be tacklers just bounce off this dude constantly, and he keeps his feet. And, I really wanted this guy to be like a my guy, but it sounds like he's going to be an everybody's guy at this point.
Yeah.
So I know we did some previews. We've been talking about the class over the last, because we always do. That's just what Garrett and I love to do. So I'm sure you guys have heard about us talking Ashton Jeanty and us talking him up. But he's showing out. He's showing out, making us look good on those talks. So let's move on to me at 104. And it's funny because, like, Garrett drafted Ashton Jeanty, who I guess was kind of my guy. And now I'm taking Omarion Hampton, who was a guy Garrett has liked for a long time, running back from North Carolina. And another guy that has weight to him, has that NFL size, 6 foot, 220 pounds. 2023 put up over 1,500 yards and 15 touches, averaged 5.9 yards per carry. caught 29 passes. He led the nation last year in yards after contact, and this is what this guy is going to give you. He's a bruiser, but he's also pretty nifty, and he can make you miss. He's a good athlete. So I really like what I've seen from Omarion Hampton. The more I've gotten a chance to like dig into him a little more. So far this year, he's put up 129 yards versus Minnesota in their opener, and then he had 77 yards against Charlotte in their next week. He exited the game with an injury, but I don't think it's serious. It's not going to keep him out for a long time. But man, he's a bruiser. He's going to get you first downs. He's able to catch the ball. I guess when he came back to North Carolina this year, he had told the coaching staff that he wants to be featured a little more as a pass catcher. So I'm sure that he's wanting to show that for his NFL draft stock. But Garrett, tell the people why they need to be on Omarion Hampton and why we like him so much.
No, I think you did a great job breaking him down. He really is just a talented running back. And one of the things I like, even though he is physically imposing, he does a really good job at when he needs to use his power, he uses it and he uses it well. But he does a really good job of not taking on the whole tackler, which I think is a really underrated aspect of playing running back. Like, yes, like this was me in high school. I knew I was strong. Like, I wasn't the fastest guy, but I knew I was strong. So I ran right into you and I just wanted to run over your face. That's all I cared about. But that's not the smartest way to run. And what he does a good job is not taking on the whole tackler. He does a good job of taking on more glancing blows where it's much harder for a guy to wrap up if they are getting the side of you and your shoulder, as opposed to you just running straight into him and running him over. So yes, he has the power, and yes, he can run guys over, but he reminds me of Jonathan Taylor was always very good at that, at kind of almost gliding a little bit in the hole to not have to take on the whole tackler, even though he was a physical running back. Like, I see that out of Hampton as well. So I've been really, really encouraged with what I've seen out of him. I know preseason he was rated. The ACC did like a top 25 players in the ACC. He was picked as the top player in the ACC this year. So there's a lot to like about this kid. And there were other running backs that were highly recruited in his class that went to North Carolina as well. He beat them all out, and he's looking like the real deal.
Yeah, I think when the time comes, there's still a lot of season to play out, folks, like in college football this year, obviously. So a lot of this is going to change, but Garrett and I have been able to like get into the film a little more, from the first 2 weeks of college football, see what these guys are looking like. And yeah, man, I could see Omarion Hampton even be an RB1 when the time comes next year. So Garrett,
absolutely, you
are on the clock, sir. 105.
Yeah. I am going to go with TreVeyon Henderson here at 105. I like this kid quite a bit. He's still got good size, but he's of these main backs that we're discussing, he is on the smaller side, but he's also one of the most explosive running backs. Now, we're not talking tiny, but I'm guessing he's going to probably weigh in at the combine probably in that 205 range. You think that's fair, Jared?
Yeah, probably 210, 205. Yeah.
Yeah, I think somewhere in there. So he's definitely not small. We're not talking about.
He's listed at 212 right now.
Yeah, which usually you could take 5 to 10 off of whatever they're listed typically.
Right.
So I think he's going to be smaller. But when you talk about a guy with those quick twitch 0 to 60 type burst, that's what Henderson has. And last year, I know his stock dropped a little bit, and he's been dealing with some injuries the past couple seasons and a little bit banged up. And even week 1, it's tough. They were playing Akron, small school, but this past week we got to really kind of see him look like his old self. The guy that as a freshman was taking the world by storm. Like, he looked like a world beater as a freshman. He looks like his old self again. He was even starting to look like his old self again last year. but another guy that's going to be really good in the receiving game. Great in pass protection too, which Ohio State players at running back traditionally, they do a good job in pass protection. But for a guy that's not that big, you'll see over and over him make some really good plays in pass protection where he does an excellent job of shooting his hands. He's not afraid to step into contact where a lot of guys are catching, which you don't want to see. So there's just a lot of little things that he does really well. But when you want a player that can break off those huge runs, he's the type of player that can do that.
Elite explosiveness, like you said, good agility, good contact balance. I think the one con I have with him sometimes when I watch him, because we get to watch a lot of Ohio State around here, what do you know?
Yeah.
Is he just seems a little tight sometimes, like in his hips. I don't know what it is. Like it's like sometimes
he's not as elusive.
Yeah, sometimes guys are really good athletes, which he is a really good athlete, but they tend to be like a little tight for like football, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying like it's just a little bit there for me. It's not totally like writing him off or anything like that, but I think we have him where we should have him right now in this mock draft. I agree with, like, I would probably take him here as well. I might even take the next guy, his teammate, before him, but let's see how this year plays out for Trey. I think he's even a guy, like if he finishes really well, he could be the RB1. You know, we're looking at a really good running back class here.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you just mentioned his teammate, Quinshon Judkins, right?
I'm next. Yep. I'm taking Quinshon Judkins, running back, Ohio State, transfer in from Ole Miss. And man, this guy set the SEC on fire. He's the first player in SEC history to score 15 plus touchdowns in each of his first 2 seasons. And that was with Ole Miss, like I said. He was a first team also SEC running back last year. He can catch balls out of the backfield. He accounted for Ole Miss's 50% of Ole Miss's rush yards and 52% of the team's rushing touchdowns last year. He had over 1,100 yards, 15 touchdowns on 271 carries. This guy's profile as a running back, it is break tackles, make you miss, not like the fastest guy in the world, but he does have good burst and good enough burst at the running back position. I think he has really good vision. He's just really, like, he's just a tough player. He actually reminds me a little bit of Kareem Hunt, to give you like a comp to how like his play style is. Yeah. So Ohio State's just loaded in the backfield with Trey and Judkins, and they're on a bye this week. But once we get into the Big Ten schedule, well, it'll be interesting to see how these guys fare and how they eat into each other a little bit and see where the Buckeyes finish. But as far as Judkins, like, he's another guy that could end up being RB1. Like, he's really good. He's just a really good player, and he's done it since coming in as a true freshman. And when you see that and guys are able to do that, like, that speaks volumes about who they are as a football player. I have heard there are some like off the field things with him. I don't necessarily like have details on that, but I have seen some, just some attitude things written about him that, could drop his draft stock, but nothing really crazy that I've heard about that we need to go over here. Any thoughts on Judkins, Garrett?
Yeah, I hadn't thought of it before, but I don't hate that Kareem Hunt comp at all, because that is kind of how I see Judkins. I don't see necessarily an elite trait with him. There's not that thing that you're like, that's his thing. But is there anything that I can point to in his game where I'm like, yeah, he's really deficient there? Absolutely not. Like, he's kind of this jack of all trades where he's very stout. He's very solid as a runner. He's got good power, but he can do some things in the receiving game as well. Like, he's just going to be a good, solid all-around back. So, yeah, he's a tough one to fully nail down at this moment. And I'm really excited, you mentioned it, to get into Big Ten play for him, because Ohio State's first 2 games were cupcakes. So it's tough to glean a lot from those types of games. Once we start to see them go up against the Purdues, the Wisconsins, the Michigans, we're going to have a much better idea of what we have out of these players. So yeah, I'm really excited to get into that. At my next pick here, I bet there's a lot of people saying, I feel like there's a player that should have gone within the first 4 picks that has not gone yet. And I'm going to take him here. I'm going to take Ollie Gordon. Now, Jared, I actually, even though this is my pick, I want to let you start because you sent me a message today that I thought was telling. And I have not done a deep enough dive. I watched one game, and I don't feel confident making a overwhelming decision based on one game. But, and I know you haven't watched a crazy amount either, but you've watched 2 or 3 games on him now. Tell me about Ollie Gordon and why maybe he's a little overhyped.
Yeah, and so Ollie Gordon, I mean, he's the consensus RB1 for a lot of people, I think, or I would just say for the community in general. Now, Ashton Jeanty has definitely come on the scene where he's kind of stealing that. But so, put him where you want him, top 3 running back right now. So I remember last year watching a little bit of Ollie Gordon. I'm just like, wasn't super impressed just from like a prospect standpoint. Now he's putting up the stats. He won the Doak Walker Award last year. Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year, finished 7th in the Heisman voting, which is the highest for any running back. So had a phenomenal 2023, and a lot of people think highly of him. I looked through some of his tape over the last couple of days, and to me, I think everyone's way too high on him as a NFL prospect right now. He's 6'2", 220. He carries it well. He just looks really tight to me. There's not a lot of movement skills in his game that I think is going to translate to the NFL. If a rushing lane is there, he can hit it. He's got good speed, but I felt like at least in the few games that I watched, like the yards that he picked up were most of the time where he was able to bounce it around the corner and just beat him to the house. And we've seen this out of Oklahoma State before with Chuba Hubbard. I mean, the Big 12 doesn't have the best defenses. So I'm calling it right now. I think when it comes time for everybody to actually do their due diligence and break down the tape and watch these prospects, like Ollie Gordon is probably going to fall back even outside of the top 5. This running back class is loaded. I don't even know if he'll be in like my top 6 when the time comes, just from what I've seen. So buyer beware right now. And I think if you do have him in like TreVeyon C2C leagues, if you don't need that production in your C2C leagues, or if you can offset it with a guy from like a lower program, I would look to move him and get what you can now. But I will say he is big and he carries his weight well, and he's not scared of contact, and he will initiate that contact and plow forward when he needs to. And I think he actually does get pretty low for being 6'2" at the running back position at the point of contact, which is good to see. Mm-hmm. But aside from that, I just think he's super tight and doesn't move well in between the tackles and just kind of struggles a little bit. And he doesn't really like keep his balance well, and a lot of these little things that I really look for that translate to the next level.
So, like I said, I watched one game, but I did do a little bit of research. Had 2,000 scrimmage yards last year, so just an absurd amount of on-the-ground production, 21 touchdowns on the ground. Then he had an additional touchdown through the air. I think one positive I will say for a guy of his size, which is freak size, by the way. Like, it's not just good size, it's freak size. He is actually a very good pass catcher. Didn't have a single drop last year. Now, I'm not going to say he's like a weapon running routes necessarily, but like I have zero concerns with him in the passing game, taking dump offs, taking screens, things like that. I think he's going to be just fine there. But I will say in the one game that I did watch, I wasn't underwhelmed. I wasn't overwhelmed. I was just whelmed. I think.
What game did you watch?
I watched the Houston game.
Okay.
The one thing that bugged me though, for a guy that is as big as he is, there was too much hopping. Like he likes to jump around quite a bit, and I want him to plant and use that power and go more. To where I think like he almost had like nervous feet at times where he was like hopping around waiting for a hole to develop. And I wanted to see a little more decisiveness there out of him. So that was the one thing that I kind of, and it's one game. Maybe that was just a weird thing that happened against Houston. I don't know.
Yeah.
But that was the one thing that I did see.
All right. Well, those are our thoughts on Ollie Gordon. Can't wait to get the hate online. But if you agree, let me know. I'm on the clock here with 108, and I am taking the Paul Hornung Award winner last year as the nation's most versatile player. Can you guess who the most versatile player in college football is right now? Plays both sides of the football. Travis Hunter from Colorado.
I was going to pick Travis Gather. Dang it.
Plays both wide receiver and cornerback at an exceptionally high level for Colorado. So, I mean, so far in this season, watching Colorado, dude, I feel like he's a better pass catcher than he is corner. I mean, we were talking about body control earlier with Tet McMillan. Travis Hunter has that. I mean, he is an elite, and I don't use that word lightly. He is an elite athlete. Mm-hmm. He's very good. So I think if he can be a little more refined, in his route running a little bit, which can be taught, he could end up being even the first receiver off the board, dude. Like, I think he is that talented. So it's going to depend on what the team that selects him, what position they want him to play, or he tells them that he wants to play. Or, I mean, shit, they could let him run both sides of the football. Let him do both. I mean, he does it at a high level in college, and it doesn't seem to slow him down at all. So, I mean, we'll see. But I've heard, like, off the field, he's a great kid. He's an academic All-American. He has perfect 4.0 GPA in school. So there's not really much not to like here. I think he's probably going to be a top 10 pick in the 2025 NFL draft. So to get him at 108, I think the reason he's at 108 in like a mock like this with you and I is because we just don't have clarity yet on if he's going to play offense, because we only care about offense. We're not covering IDP here. But if we knew that he was for sure going to play receiver, we're probably looking at taking him in those top 4, top 3 picks.
Yeah, I don't think I could put him above, like, even if I knew today that he was for sure playing just wide receiver. I don't know that I can put him quite ahead of Burden and McMillan. At this point, he would probably be wide receiver 3 for me, because there is just some of that nuanced stuff and just the lack of top tier corners that he's had to go against. Like I remember in week 1, now granted, another guy with freak body control, like really, really good body control, really good at the catch point. Fantastic
4'4",
at the catch point.
Speed. Yep. 6'1", too. Good size. Length.
But the thing that I struggle with is it seems like he is, like I said, dominating lower competition, but also he is very handsy. Now that could be coached. That could be
you
taught.
texted me that.
Yeah,
he's a cheater.
Yeah, he bugs me. He bugs me with that.
And like, get called for it.
He does not get called for it, which I'm not sure how always, because like some of them he does okay with, like
pretty
getting
obvious.
It low and whatnot, but like some of them are like really high. Like I don't know how he's not getting called for that. So I think the numbers would look a little bit different if it was being called a little bit tighter, which they will at the NFL level. So like that's the thing that makes me a little bit nervous, even though their traits are elite. Like he there's a lot of little things that he needs to clean up for me to feel good about him as a true receiver.
Don't let that bother you, Garrett. Come on, you can clean that stuff up. I mean, they coach these guys to use their hands a little bit at the catch point to give themselves a little extra room of separation. It's just about how you can hide it and how savvy you are.
Right.
So, I mean, I like to see that he's doing that already, because there's a lot of guys that don't do that. And
sure, I'd rather him be aggressive than not, but
yeah.
But
for me, I'd probably have him above Burden if I knew for sure he was going to play receiver.
Okay.
For the record. You're up.
At 1.9, I dipped back into the wide receiver well.
Ooh.
And I think this is probably where it could go a lot of different directions. I think basically everyone will tell you the top 3 receivers are the top 3 receivers in some order. Maybe it's mixed up to compared to what we have, but those are going to be the top 3 receivers almost everywhere. At 1.9, I ended up going Isaiah Bond. And we were talking about Quinn Ewers earlier. Isaiah Bond, the transfer from Alabama. And he is hilarious because it's Xavier Worthy again. Like, it's Xavier Worthy again. Like,
say he runs a 4.2.
Like, if like the guy Xavier Worthy just broke the record for the 40-yard dash. And I look at this kid and I'm like, he looks like he's going the same speed as Xavier. Like, we'll see. Who knows? But like, it would be hilarious to have another guy from the same team break the record a year later. Like, it would just be bonkers to me. But it's another player who it seems like at this point, and I haven't done the deep dives, but I've seen some of the highlights. I've watched him play. I watched the Michigan game. Like, it's more than just a speed guy. Like, he runs good routes. He figures out ways to get open. It's not just I'm faster than you and there's nothing you can do about it. Like, he's actually a wide receiver. And we saw in week 1 what Xavier Worthy can do at the NFL level. You know, Jared and I, we were texting back and forth with Rich and Matt and like joking about how, hey, we're going to put him in our lineups because all it takes is 1. Well, then he got 2. He got 2 touchdowns in week 1. And NFL teams need guys like this. They need guys that can just be better than everybody else because, hey, I'm just faster and I can get open and you're not going to stop me. And so at this point, I think NFL teams are going to see what happened with Xavier Worthy and say, shoot, why did we let the Kansas City Chiefs get a guy like that? And they're going to want
Dolphins.
their own. The Dolphins, the Bills literally traded with them. Like, they're going to want a piece of that. And Isaiah Bond, I think, is a top 20 pick next year.
I agree. I think he's a first-round pick with this athleticism and his ability to play the receiver position, that not just being an athlete, he's an absolute playmaker. He was Alabama's leading receiver last year. Nick Saban retired. Joins Quinn Ewers. I'm sure Quinn Ewers was pretty excited to welcome Isaiah Bond to that receiving group. I mean, they got Matthew Golden as well, and a couple other good receivers. But anyway, I'm with you on Bond. I like him a lot. I think he's going to be a 2025 rookie draft first-round pick in 1 QB leagues. And we'll see how he gets pushed when we have the quarterbacks enter the group. But at 110, I'm up here, and I'm gonna stick with Old Faithful here. OHIO, Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver from Ohio State, 6'1", 205 pounds, senior, a guy that we thought might come out last year, but he was a little banged up in 2023. He had 515 yards and 4 touchdowns last year, so a little bit of a down year. And we got into his tape even a little bit last year, thinking that he was going to come out. And to be honest, I was a little underwhelmed with what I saw. So 2024 is a big year for him in his draft stock. He earlier this year, so far, I think he had 4 catches for 51 yards. Is that all that he's put up so far? I'm sorry.
He hasn't. No, I think that's it, because so far he's actually been seemingly the wide receiver 2 at Ohio State. This freak freshman named Jeremiah Smith is just bonkers.
Goodness, dude. Yeah, he's a beast. So Egbuka is a guy that I like. Hold on, I got it here. 5 catches for 98 yards last week, and then 4 catches for 51 yards in week 1. So
okay,
yeah. Well, once we get into Big Ten play, like we said earlier with Judkins and Trey, we'll see on Egbuka, but has really good speed. Says to run in the 4.3s. I'm not sure if that's true from just watching him on the field. I think he's more of a 4.4 guy, but good route runner, good hands, can return kicks. One of the highest recruits coming out of high school. I think he was the number 1 wide receiver recruit in his high school class.
Out of Washington.
So really good recruiting pedigree. So we'll see on this guy. He could turn out to be a first-round pick, but as of right now, if I were to peg him for a draft projection, I would say mid-second. What do you think, Garrett?
I think that sounds about right. And yeah, I think he's going to make an NFL team very happy. I think he's going to be a very solid player, can do a lot over the middle, strong receiver, but he's not a game breaker like some of these other guys that we've been talking about. But at the tight end position, Colston Loveland might be a game breaker. He's looked really good thus
Ohio
far.
State to Michigan.
Yep, going all the way across here. Look, I hate rooting for Michigan guys. I was so excited last week when they got their butt kicked. It was fantastic. But
hey, you're not rooting for them. You're just selecting them in a mock draft.
Exactly. At the end of the day, I want the best players on my fantasy teams. And Colston Loveland looks like the next really good tight end. He's got the size that you want. He ate Ohio State alive last year. Can make the plays over the middle. You can split him out wide. He's a good enough athlete. I don't think he's going to be a freak athlete like some of these other tight ends we've seen, but he's not going to be lacking in the athleticism department at all. So it's one of those situations where there's a lot of other solid running backs, solid receivers in this class, but I think he's far and away the best tight end. And so I wanted to get that guy on my team. So I took him here at 111.
I like it. He's young. He's only 20 right now. So entering next year, he'll be 21 because his birthday is in April. So young player, has all the size that you'd want. I think he's 6'6", 240 pounds. Let's see. What do I have him at? 6'5", 245 pounds. Sorry. But yeah, has everything you want out of a tight end. Tenacious player too. I mean, he'll take it to you, and you're not gonna like it. We haven't liked it as Buckeye fans.
We have not.
No,
we have not.
Yeah. I think I am up next, Garrett.
Last pick,
and it is our last pick, and it's a guy that if you don't really pay attention to college football, you probably haven't heard of him yet. And he comes from a school that has put a lot of really good receivers in the NFL, and that's LSU's wide receiver, Kyren Lacy. 6'2", 213 pounds. And through 2 games this year, he's amassed 12 receptions for 59 yards and 4 touchdowns. I've really liked what I've seen from him so far this year, and I've had the opportunity to actually watch both LSU games so far. And I mean, another guy that has really good body control. If you're in the Devy and C2C space, you've probably heard, and we're looking forward to his breakout this year. I heard a lot of people talking about him, but I think he's a really good route runner. He's good footwork, good at hand fighting at the top of his route. There's just a lot of things to like with him. So I think right now he's a little under the radar, but when the time comes, we're probably looking at an early day 2 pick with Kyren Lacy. One of the cons with him is he is an older prospect. I think he's going to be 24 years old during his rookie season. So, some people put a lot of weight into that. And obviously it's better to have a 21-year-old over the 24-year-old
Sure.
if both of them are even. So Kyren Lacy, I wanted to squeeze him in here because he showed out pretty well so far this year. And I've liked what I've seen from him on the field.
Yeah, and they got
thoughts on him.
Yeah, they got to. I saw him in the A&M game, and he looked good. I mean, he looked good against them, and he ran some nice corner routes and showed good body control on the sidelines. So, like, there was the limited tape that I've seen, I've been impressed. I've been impressed, and this was a team that, after graduating 2 guys that went in the first round, desperately needed someone to step up and be their wide receiver 1, and they got it this year with Lacy. So I think that's a good pick. He was somebody I was considering at 111 as well. So I think that's a really good pick.
Love it. Let's let me go through the picks here. So just to recap, we're only doing a first round mock here. First pick was Garrett, and he took Luther Burden. Second pick was Tet McMillan, wide receiver from Arizona. Third pick was Ashton Jeanty, running back from Boise State. At pick 4 was Omarion Hampton, running back from North Carolina. Pick 5, TreVeyon Henderson, running back, Ohio State. Pick 6, running back from Ohio State again, Quinshon Judkins, transfer from Ole Miss. Pick 7, Ollie Gordon, running back from Oklahoma State. Pick 8, Travis Hunter, wide receiver, Colorado. Pick 9, Isaiah Bond, wide receiver, Texas. Pick 10, Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver from Ohio State. Pick 11, we have a tight end from Garret, Colston Loveland from Michigan. And pick 12, I took Kyren Lacy, wide receiver from LSU. Garret, do you want to just hit on a few other guys? We don't have to go into detail, but just some guys that might be notable, or people might be like, I'm surprised this guy's name wasn't mentioned. Just in case anybody here, they're listening for an update on the 2025 draft class. So I think we should just touch on slightly like why it's important to pay attention to the upcoming class, and, maybe just recap this class as a whole as of right now, like what its strengths and weaknesses are, and like what people should be looking forward to and what they should be doing maybe with their like draft picks right now. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, that was a lot, but I'll do my best.
I know. You had like 5 bullet points.
Just recap everything ever about college football, please.
Let's start with some players that people should know.
There we go. That sounds good. Couple. There's some good running backs in this class. This is what this class is known for. It's known for their running backs. There's another Big 12 guy, Devin Neal. I think he's a good name. He's got solid size, explosive player. So he's another one to kind of keep an eye on. And honestly, we could list 4, 5, 6 more running backs. He's probably the next favorite for me personally. Trevor Etienne got an opportunity this week. He missed week 1 due to suspension, but he got an opportunity, put up some good numbers in his limited touches. Nick Singleton is up there. The kid from Rutgers, how do you pronounce his last name, Jared?
Kyle Munningai.
I tried to text him. I tried to text Jared, and I definitely butchered this kid's last name. And I literally just put spelling ? Because I had no idea how to spell it.
Dude, he reminds me of Pacheco. It's funny because Pacheco's from Rutgers.
They run angry. Any other running backs you want to like throw into that mix?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple. Dylan Sampson from Tennessee. He's looked good so far this year.
He's looked real good. I have him on my C2C team.
Yeah, Jaden Blue from Texas. Sleeper, I like RJ Harvey from UCF. I think he's really
I don't know
good.
much about him.
5'9", 210. He puts up points in campus to Canton leagues, that's for sure. But yeah, receivers, we got some guys that we didn't take. Evan Stewart, who's had a really slow start this year at Oregon. He transferred from Texas A&M. Barrion Brown from Kentucky's started pretty slow this year. Juice Wells or Antoine Wells transferred to Ole Miss from South Carolina. He was banged up all training camp leading up to the season, but he was able to play, and he had a touchdown in their first game. So I do like what I've seen from him. Matthew Golden from Texas, Ricky White from UNLV. There's a good amount of good receivers too. So
I'll throw Trey Harris into that mix as well. He's been putting up some numbers so far.
Yeah. Yep. So and there's our couple other tight ends. Luke Lachey from Iowa, Terrence Ferguson, who's done really well so far for Oregon. Tyler Warren from Penn State has looked really good so far this year. So I mean, Garret, for guys that don't play Devy and campus to Canton, they're curious. Most people love the draft. They're curious on, hey, I'm holding 2025 draft picks, so I want to know what that class is going to look like. Is it going to be as good as last year's? Like, how are we stacking up to the previous years? And I would say personally, like, if we get another first round crop of quarterbacks, like 4 or 5, we're looking at another first and second, like, deep class all the way through the second round, because this running back class is much better than what we got last year.
Yeah,
if you need running backs, this is the year.
For sure. Yeah, running backs, that's the name of the game here. You got your top end receivers. The second tier of receivers is a little bit more up in the air at this point, not as deep as this last year's class at this point. For like that kind of second tier group of guys, the Worthies and the Brian Thomases and whatnot, but we still got a lot of college football to go. We'll see how that kind of develops and goes. You got Colston Loveland, who to me, he's far and away the best tight end. Is there anybody else that you think is really close or no?
As of right now, I think Colston Loveland, just from what I know and what I've seen, is the top guy pretty easily.
Yeah.
But
right now at the quarterback spot, we at this point already knew about Caleb Williams for a while. We knew about Drake May for a while. Those two guys ended up being, top 5 picks in the NFL draft. I think that's the biggest difference at this point is better running backs in this class, but less certainty at the top with quarterbacks, I think is the two big differences.
I think from a pure passer standpoint, we have better quarterbacks in this class from guys that are just able to make every throw and run an offense. Like, I mean, Carson Beck's got really good arm talent too. I mean, Quinn Ewers, Cam Ward, and Carson Beck have great arm talent. So I think and Shedeur Sanders, I'm sorry. All 4 of them can make every pass. So yeah, man. I think if you went into like 2 years ago, if you did like a startup and you kind of booted first year and last year and this year you're kind of ramping up, and then next year if you timed it to where next year is the year you want to compete and you're able to load up on some of these running backs, like that was perfect timing because this is the draft class for that. Garrett, take us out of here.
Absolutely. Well, guys, thank you so much for tuning in. We love doing the Talkin Dynasty show. Obviously, this one a little different because we don't usually talk as much about players as we do theories and things like that, but we want to make sure that you guys are getting all this information. One of the biggest things we heard from the Nerd Herd is we want to know about these players sooner, so we wanted to do a better job this year, and we thought this was the platform to do it. So you'll be getting a little more player talk on this show than you do in the off season, but trust me, plenty more when it comes to game theory, scouting, things like that on the way here as well. So we're going to give you everything. We're going to be the best of everything. So appreciate you guys, and we'll see you guys very soon.